church family. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. Whenever you're going to watch this video or listen to this video, I hope you're doing well, and I'm excited to bring to you the next installment of our character study in church history. As you can tell, I'm in my office today, and Pastor Nate is not with me today, so it's just going to be me and you. If you've been following along, we've been going through a different character in church history each week, and today I'm excited to bring to you our next study on Clement of Alexandria. If you remember, before we did a character study on another man named Clement, but he was Clement of Rome. Clement of Alexandria is a 3rd century believer who lived from 150 AD to 215 AD. He was born, like Justin Martyr, to unbelieving parents, but he also loved to learn. He loved to learn about truth, and so he became a philosopher and lived in the city of Alexandria, which is near modern-day Cairo, Egypt. Alexandria, in the time of Clement, was one of the biggest trade centers of the Roman Empire, and it is actually the epicenter of educational learning in the Roman Empire. This allowed Clement to learn from other people and cultures, and he had one of the most brilliant minds in church history. He was so well versed in Jewish thought, Greek thought, Roman thought, and just the whole Christian thought in general. Once he became a believer, he devoted his life to teaching and sharing the truth of Scripture and Christian doctrine. He's important for us today because he teaches the kind of attitude we as Christians should have toward the material possessions that we own. Remember, he lived in Alexandria. It is one of the most wealthiest places in the Roman Empire, and so Christians in that area naturally were wealthy. They didn't earn it in dishonest gain, but they earned it with honest gain. And so the Christians in that area asked the question that we all should ask: how can they be good Christians if all they have is their wealth? They wanted to know, can they be a good Christian even though they had money, even though they had possessions, even though they had jobs that paid well? And that's a good question for us to answer or ask. Clement tackles this question by asking another question. He asks us all this question: how do you view wealth and possessions? In one of Clement's most famous sermons when he was a pastor, he spoke on the parable that Jesus gave in Luke 18 on the rich young ruler. Clement shares that there are basically 2 types of possessions: internal and external. Internal possessions are like love, faith, hope, joy, contentment, peace. But external is like money, food, clothes, house, furniture. Clement's basic argument is, what is your attitude toward material possessions? Clement shares that it's not the possessions themselves that are the issue, but our attitude is the issue. Our attitude is 9 out of 10 times the problem when it comes to what we're dealing with. What we fixate our eyes on, our heart will naturally follow. And Clement shares that possessions aren't naturally evil, but how we look at them or how we use them will have an effect on how we view ourselves, how we view the world, and how we view even God himself. Clement shares in his writings on this issue that we as Christians are called to value the internal possessions that we own, the possessions that we've been given through Christ, like hope and love and faith, because those things are eternal. They will never perish, but the external possessions will. I don't know if you know this, but I don't know much about cars. In fact, I remember a few months ago that I had a friend come to me and he said, "David, you know, your car is starting to look like it's getting some rust." And to me, I was like, well, I don't know what that means, but it sounds like it's not good. And so he had to explain to me everything, what it meant with rust and what happens to the car and all that kind of stuff and what I should do. And it just reminds me that things that we own, these possessions that we own, they're good, but they will not last forever. And Clement wants us to understand that our values should be put in building up those eternal possessions that we own through Christ: our love, our joy, our hope, and our peace. So, what can we learn from Clement for our lives today? The first is this: our attitude toward possessions is more important than the possessions themselves. One of the biggest things he's done for us as Christians and as the church in general is that when Christians become wealthy or their work is giving them money, Clement focuses on how we should respond to that wealth. How should we act appropriately when we have those possessions? Clement's teaching shows us that we should not build up for ourselves external possessions, no matter how much clothes we have or furniture or what kind of car you drive or what house you have. Those things, although they're good, will not last forever. And Clement urges us to build up those eternal possessions that we have. The second thing I have for you is that you have an influence over the next generation. I didn't talk about it because I wanted to wait until the end, but Clement discipled and taught one of the most brilliant teachers that we are going to get into next week. His name is Origen, and consequently his name was Origen of Alexandria because he stayed in the place where Clement was. Clement discipled and taught him, and it's evidence to me that we as Christians have the opportunity to disciple the next generation. We have the opportunity to show them what it means to live for Jesus, to live not for the world and all these possessions, but to live for eternity, to live for the hope that is in Jesus. We have the opportunity to share the gospel, to share the love of God through our lives, the way we live. Not what we have or what we own or what vacation we go on, but how we live our lives. How we disciple and discipline ourselves in growing in truth and knowledge, in worshiping God, in serving one another, in loving one another, in having joy in hard times such as we are in right now. We have the opportunity to disciple the next generation, and it's a beautiful gift and responsibility that God has given us. So, as we finish our chapter on Clement of Alexandria, the last thing I just want you guys to know is don't let possessions determine your joy. Don't let your materials determine your joy, because one day those things won't be there. If this virus and this quarantine has taught us anything, it is that we don't know what's going to happen next. It teaches us that we should value what God values, and what God values is people. We should put our worth and our time and our energy and our treasures even into sharing the gospel with people. Because as Clement shared, what's external will fade away, but what's internal and what's eternal will last forever. We are called as Christians to have our hope and our joy in the eternal living Son of God, not in the materials that He's blessed us with. So, it's my prayer that we would never, ever exchange the Creator for the creation. He is the creator of everything, and He is beautiful, and He is wonderful, and He is worthy of our time and our energy to focus on Him, to build up those qualities and those eternal possessions that we have been given through Christ. My prayer for you and for me is that we would begin to not live for material things, but that we would live for eternity. And when we do that, we are more like Christ than we could ever be. God bless, church family.